Greetings and welcome back. It's your host, Gabe Morales. We've been covering the Utah Department of Corrections.
People serving time say a change inside Utah's prison system has led to violent consequences.
KSL investigator Daniela Rivera has been digging into whether the decision was backed by data, as some worry that their loved ones will not survive their sentence.
It was no secret then.
They knew the rivalry between them. They knew.
And it's no secret now.
He was an active gang member. I'm not going to deny that.
Juanita Martinez says her son's gang affiliation cost him his life.
Yeah, that's why he got killed.
But she believes Jeffrey Vigil's death should have been prevented. In March 2016, corrections officials moved him to a different housing area inside the Utah State Prison. According to a lawsuit filed by his family, Jeffrey went to guards twice with concerns that he would not be safe there, outnumbered by rival gang members. Just hours after he was moved, Juanita says her son was stabbed and stomped to death.
My son suffered tremendously.
If Utah Department of Corrections was better managing its gang population, you believe your son would be alive today?
Yes. Definitely.
She says Jeffrey's death at the hands of rival gang members should have served as a warning. That's why she was shocked when she learned about a significant change to how the department manages prison gangs just a few years later. In an August 2019 memo, officials announced the elimination of the AB schedule, which kept two rival gangs apart. The AB schedule was implemented in 2014 after a spike in violence, but officials said it was always supposed to be temporary, and ending segregation would allow more offenders to participate in rehabilitative programs.
I feel like it's like the gladiator days in there. I feel like they're doing it on purpose. They're opening doors, popping doors, letting them go at each other.
We house people directly based on their behavior, not based on their crime.
The Department of Corrections agreed to talk with us about certain approaches to housing gang members, but not about AB.
Why is the department not answering questions about the AB schedule change?
We're not answering questions about the AB because there's pending litigation. There's been a lawsuit that's been filed.
Spencer Turley is the director of prison operations. He says housing decisions are now based on several factors.
We'll take in a bigger picture view than just gang involvement.
Turley also points to this policy, revised in 2020, allowing people who voice safety concerns to be considered for housing changes. According to the department, more than 4,000 safety concerns have been filed and validated since January 1st, 2017.
We'll try and make proactive moves to prevent things from happening.
But Juanita says that proactive approach failed her son, and the KSL investigators found several documented incidents of violence since the AB schedule ended.
We discussed last time, Utah DOC has recently started reintegrating units of rival gang members. In my experience, segregating gang members or security threat groups can empower them and can often cause problems in the units they believe they have control over. On the other hand, not keeping known deadly enemies separate can lead to violence and disruption in housing units. And as I stated in part 1, DOC does say they have a policy in place to inform staff if they think they might be at risk. So let's review a little more details about street and prison gangs within the state of Utah. There are up to 5,000 gang members in the Salt Lake Valley alone, including over 3 dozen Hispanic gangs, with quite a few Sureño cliques, including Chiques, The Avenues, 18th Street, 38th Street, Florencia, White Fence, Barrio Nueva Estrada, as well as local gangs like Ogden 13 and Barrio Loco Town. Law enforcement has noticed a change in recruitment methods, particularly in the use of social media. I believe, as a whole, Sureños are the dominant street gang group in Utah. But like California, not all of them get along on the streets. They will usually unify in prison, though. There are also Norteño cliques in the state, like Rose Park Norteños, Familia Barrio Loco, Familia Por Siempre, Barrio Uno, 6th Street Norte, Brown Society Gang, Tiny Locos, Diamond Street, Mafiosos, and 21st Street Norte. While there's not as many Norteños as Sureños, they usually can get along on the street and tend to be more organized in prison, just as they are in the California Department of Corrections. In addition to Sureños and Norteños, there are also brown pride gangs, such as Cubo, Eastside Rascals, La Raza, and perhaps some others. Cubo usually aligns with Sureños, especially in the prison system. The Mexican Mafia and Nuestra Familia prison gangs have been known to send out representatives from California to the state, and there have been several validated members who have been known to communicate with these individuals. Like my home state of Washington, Nuestra Familia has made efforts to organize and restructure norteños on the streets of Utah and confiscated kites of norteños from Utah who have been exposed to NF ideologies in the Federal Bureau of Prisons reflects that. Local authorities announced a large bust called Operation Northern Exposure in the year 2020, and Norte Joe Gomez was stated to be one of the leaders of a large norteño drug network who also worked with Diamond Street 14 leader Denny Casper Kant, and they were said to be supplies by Sinaloan Mexican drug cartels. The area has seen an increase in members from large drug trafficking organizations, in particular the Sinaloa cartel, but also the New Juarez cartel. It appears as much as 70 to 80% of the area street-level narcotics have been transported through Mexico. Officers have confiscated large amounts of cocaine, Mexican black tar heroin, marijuana, methamphetamine, as well as fentanyl pills. Since 2024, some Utah law enforcement sources state that they've been hearing about the Venezuela gang Tren de Aragua, but I tend to think that TDA is overhyped in most parts of the U.S. There are also some predominantly black Crips and Bloods gang members, and occasionally Folks Nation members are found within the state. Some people may be surprised, but the Mormon Church is very big here in Hawaii, a place I've called home for over 10 years now. Mormon missionaries were some of the first ones to convert the native Hawaiians to Christianity. The state of Hawaii has many other Pacific Islanders, like Tongans and Samoans, as does California and Washington State. Many of these Pacific Islanders moved to Utah as part of their Mormon religion, and some of their kids joined street gangs. There are also some Southeast Asian gangs that have been mentioned in local arrest sweeps, like Tiny Oriental Posse, also called TOP. It appears many white youth in the state have rebelled against their parents, the system, and sometimes the Mormon faith. Charlie Lewis Sanford spent a brief time Utah's public enemy number one before being put behind bars. His criminal career started out early, and at the age of 19, he was arrested for armed bank robbery. And you can see here how his tattoos and criminal career have progressed over the years. There are two main Aryan prison gangs in Utah DOC who now also have a presence in the federal BOP. Tracy Suena was the founder and self-appointed general of Soldiers of the Aryan Culture, which is a white supremacist gang based out of the Utah State prison system. 12 members and associates of Soldiers of the Aryan Culture were indicted on a RICO case in December 2003. He eventually pled guilty to racketeering and was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. Prior to his sentencing, Suena admitted that he started Soldiers of the Aryan Culture, or SAC, back in 1997 and oversaw the gang's operations, including drug dealing and orchestrating attacks upon prison corrections officers. Under his leadership, SAC members grew rapidly by committing violence against Hispanic and black inmates. Fellow SAC member Lance Vanderstappen pled guilty to racketeering and was sentenced to 5 years. Immediately after he was sentenced, he was taken to a temporary holding cell in the U.S. District Courthouse in Salt Lake City. There, he allegedly pulled out a 3-inch homemade knife he secreted in a body cavity and repeatedly stabbed a Hispanic prisoner who shared the same cell with him. The man was a total stranger to Vanderstappen, who later was indicted for subsequent attempted murder on that case. Of course, he pleaded innocent. The gang continues to cause problems in the Utah Department of Corrections and in the federal BOP. Currently, there are over 250 members documented in Utah. In 2020, local authorities arrested over 20 Supreme White Power members, mainly members of SAC and Silent Aryan Warriors, who was another prison gang that started in the Utah correction system in the early 1990s in connection with the skinhead movement. The gang is organized in a military leadership structure. It has a council of 3 members and a warlord who governs the prison gang. Other ranks are generals, captains, lieutenants, sergeants, enforcers, warriors, and potential members are just called recruits. Their primary tattoo consists of an iron cross with the SS lightning bolts and a curved swastika at the center. Like SAC, SAW is heavily involved in the use and distribution of narcotics, primarily methamphetamine and heroin. Troy Michael Kell is an inmate on Utah's death row. He was sentenced to life in the state of Nevada for a 1986 murder of James Cotton Kelly. He then was such a problem that he was transferred to Utah State Prison in exchange program shortly after his conviction. Not too long after that, Kell attacked and killed inmate Lonnie Blackman at the Gunnison prison facility. He stabbed Blackman a total of 67 times, while his associate Eric Daniels held Blackman down, all caught on tape, and was produced into a documentary called Gladiator Days. Kell was sentenced to death by the state of Utah by firing squad for that murder, but is still appealing his case. For many years, Utah has been considered to be an open state by outlaw motorcycle gangs. Now, you might see a Hells Angel every once in a while, and the Bandidos tried establishing a presence in the state, but that chapter folded. Most clubs avoid the state due to the very tight control by the Utah State Patrol. Sons of Silence professes to have a presence in Utah per their website, but I couldn't find much information on any Utah chapters. Sons of Silence, very strong, right next door in the state of Colorado. The Barons MC and Sundowners are both known to wear their colors while riding. The Sundowners were said to have thought about patching over to Hells Angels in the 1980s, but all of those members went to jail for moving drugs. Brother Speed, who has a relatively large presence in the Pacific Northwest, had a small chapter in the state for a while, but not for very long. There are some Mongols and Bogos in the state, but they tend to keep a very low profile. Allegedly, there is a pagan support club operating in the state now as part of their Blue Wave campaign. I could not get anybody from Utah DOC to respond to my request for information, except for one captain who referred me to their public relations department. Now, it's pretty much common knowledge that the public relations department will either not respond or just refer you to their website or give a very brief statement. I know, having worked in the business for over 30 years, how the game is played. Most law enforcement public relations departments are in place to shield their departments and administrators from outside inquiries. Heck, they even often bury internal reviews by internal affairs. If there's a major riot or disturbance, they will usually downplay it and only admit that something occurred if somebody is killed or seriously injured and it gets out to the press. Even then, they will state that they have to wait until an investigation is complete or wait until they notify next of kin, etc. Now, these are general and understandable considerations for legal concerns, which is something that most departments fear the most, being sued or administrators possibly facing criminal charges, or being put under outside monitoring. For most of the videos I've done in this series, I've communicated with fairly recently retired corrections officials who were able to give me honest feedback without having to worry too much about retaliation, and such is the case in this video. I also sometimes get input from former offenders who may or may not be biased and may be guarded in their own ways. And I always try to get a good consensus from all available sources. I will state that the Utah Gang Investigators Association has given me some really good information in the past that I really appreciate. I'd also recommend that anybody interested in learning more about Utah gangs, and maybe even more importantly, Utah criminal justice agencies and politics, check out any of Ron Stallworth's books. His most recent one, Gangs of Zion, and Ron does not hold back. He was one of the first gang cops in the state who knew that Bloods and Crips were infiltrating Mormon Country, and that these gangs were threatening to turn the deeply conservative community into a hotbed of crime. Some kids were even bombing homes and doing drive-bys while carrying pocket versions of the Book of Mormon. Yet, many of his fellow cops were in denial that gangs were wreaking havoc in Utah towns. Stallworth was intent on stemming the tide of gangs in the state, but often those who he expected to be his allies either had their heads in the sand or had their own agendas. From a racist Mormon legislator to the community activists, exploiting a fatal gang incident to spread paranoia over an imaginary race war. I consider Ron to be a longtime friend of mine, and like me, he often faced harassment and retaliation from those who we should have considered to be our allies, the cops. I know that there have been some positive programs in Utah DOC. A brand new, groundbreaking documentary conceived, filmed, and produced entirely by inmates at the Utah State Prison is giving the public an inside look at life behind bars. The film Breaking Chains follows 6 incarcerated men and women as they confront their past, reflect on their choices, and work to rebuild their lives. The Utah Department of Corrections collaborated with the One Kind Act Today initiative to secure funding and equipment for the inmates. The result is a raw emotional film that highlights a little-known program operating inside of Utah DOC. May peace and God be with them and anybody else trying to improve their lives. And with that, this is Gabe Morales signing off for Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians.